Today we are going to take a look at this year's 5 biggest NFL draft winners and losers. Starting off with the honorable mentions, we have the Chiefs and the Eagles. I'm not going too in-depth with these teams as they didn't make my list. Just know that the Chiefs and the Eagles also had questionable drafts, but they weren't quite bad enough to make my list. I really don't think these teams utilized their picks well, as there were better players available at the positions they selected. At number 5, we have the Falcons. After wasting their first-round pick on A.J. Terrell, who is a raw prospect with a lot of work to do, and hasn't matched up well against any notable receivers, they proceeded to draft 2 players who are surrounded by doubts but have a small chance to be good players. With the first one being Marlon Davidson. He could bring a lot to the table once he gets coached up and works some flaws out of his game, but I think this is a little too early in the draft for him. The second pick being Matt Hennessy. He was a pick that was just not needed. Yes, Alex Mack is getting older and closer to retiring, but that seems like that could be addressed with a stud center coming out of one of the next few drafts. Coming in at number 4 is the Steelers. Their first pick in Chase Claypool is a huge reach, especially with this year's draft class stacked with good receivers and how many of those receivers were still available when Claypool was selected. They will probably slide Claypool into a wide receiver 2 or 3 position behind Juju or James Washington. They don't really have any other options at the position, but I don't think Claypool is quite there yet skill-wise. Their following picks weren't much better, with their only upside being Alex Highsmith to potentially help build up their struggling linebacking core. And drafting a running back did not make any sense to me, especially with a mid-draft pick when they already have an above-average running back in James Conner, with Jalen Samuels and Benny Snell as great backups. Falling at number 3 is the Patriots. The Patriots' first pick with Kyle Duggar is a little questionable. The defense is not something that needs a lot of improving. Their secondary was one of the best in the league last season. Their second pick with Josh Uche was more fitting and I think fills a hole well since they lost Kyle Van Noy, or I think Anthony Jennings could potentially fill that role as well. Their next 2 picks, however, are more controversial than anything else. Trading up to select 2 tight ends back-to-back, especially with Dalton Keene being controversial as to whether or not he's even a draft-worthy talent. And that brings us to number 2. What were the Seahawks doing? Jordan Brooks is a solid young talent, but not first-round pick worthy, especially when there were many better players still available when he was selected. Brooks is a very raw prospect, much like Bobby Wagner was, so we'll have to trust Pete Carroll on this one, I guess. Maybe, if he's coached up correctly, he could be the future of the linebacking core in Seattle. We'll have to see. Moving on to picks like Freddie Swain, who didn't prove anything at Florida, and DJ Dallas, who I don't think will offer the Seahawks a lot of potential at a struggling running back position. Then there's the tight ends. The last thing Seattle needed was more tight ends. They already have good talent at the position with players like Luke Wilson, Jacob Hollister, and newly signed veteran Greg Olsen. And rounding out my 5 teams and bringing in the worst draft selections of the 2020 draft, in my opinion, is the Green Bay Packers. I can't hate them for drafting for the future with Jordan Love. Aaron Rodgers is getting up there in age and won't be around forever, but they could have selected a better first-round talent and let Jordan Love fall to the second round, as I think he would have. Now, A.J. Dillon is another questionable pick, as the Packers have a top 8 running back, at least, in Aaron Jones, and Jamal Williams, who stepped up great last season to back him up. The Packers are improving their offense like they need to, but they're improving the wrong parts of it. This may be the most stacked wide receiver class in history, or at least in a very long time, and the Packers didn't even take 1 receiver, the position they need more than any other position. Not sure what they were thinking at all in this draft. Well, that concludes my 5 biggest losers of the 2020 NFL Draft. Now let's have a look at the winners.
Now we're going to look at the top 5 biggest draft winners. At number 5, we're going to look at the Detroit Lions. With their first round pick, they picked a dynamic cornerback out of The Ohio State University. That is Jeff Okuda. He is going to be very essential in their secondary, and he is going to back up Desmond Trufant very well. Him and Desmond Trufant are going to be a force to be reckoned with in Detroit. Round 2, they picked DeAndre Swift, a running back. He is going to be amazing with Kerryon Johnson. This was an amazing pick. They picked 2 guards that they need a guard. The Detroit Lions, they don't have very good guard talent right now with TJ Lang retiring. They need some good guards. So Jonah Jackson and Logan Stenberg are going to help. Towards the end of the draft, in round 6 and 7, they drafted defensive tackles. That is going to help on their defense after losing Mike Daniels and Damon Snacks Harrison. That is going to be very essential for them. At number 4, we're going to look at the Cleveland Browns. Their first-round draft pick was Jedrick Wills, offensive tackle of Alabama. They need an offensive tackle. Ever since Big Joe Thomas, ever since he left, they haven't had much help. Baker Mayfield's only getting hurt more. He's only getting sacked more. They need some help on that front, and I think Jedrick Wills is the perfect man to do it. In round 2, they picked Grant Delpit. He is a safety out of LSU, and obviously he's an amazing pick. They couldn't have picked Xavier McKinney because he was already picked by the Giants earlier at pick 36. So they had to go with the next best safety, and I think it's an amazing pick. Their safety help is not very good, and he is going to fit in just perfectly. Harrison Bryant, tight end out of Florida Atlantic, he is going to back up David Njoku and maybe even take his spot someday, or maybe they can be a dual-threat tight end looking combination, and that will be amazing. And then their round 6, Donovan Peoples-Jones. He is a very good wide receiver out of the University of Michigan, and I think he is an absolute steal in a very good wide receiver draft class. At number 3, we're going to look at the Arizona Cardinals. With their first-round pick, they picked Isaiah Simmons, a very good linebacker who can be amazing with Chandler Jones back there. He's a great person just on social media as well. He goes with fans all the time. In round 3, you got Josh Jones they picked, offensive tackle out of Houston. And again, just like the Cleveland Browns, they needed some offensive help on the line. I think he is perfect to do it. He is almost a steal in the 3rd round. Eno Benjamin, running back out of Arizona State. They needed a pretty good running back because all they got left is Kenyon Drake after the David Johnson trade to the Texans. Now we're going to look at number 2, the Baltimore Ravens. Their round 1 pick is an absolute steal, and I think this is one of the best steals of the century. Patrick Queen. Who would ever thought that he wouldn't have went to the Saints? I thought he was going to absolutely go to the Saints. He went to LSU, inside linebacker, and he did not go to the Saints. I cannot believe that. But he did not go to the Saints, and he went instead to the Baltimore Ravens, who have already a pretty stacked defense, and it's only going to get more stacked. Earl Thomas is back there, and he's gonna captain up this guy, and I think they're gonna do amazing. With their round 2 pick, they picked running back J.K. Dobbins out of The Ohio State University, and he is a very good pick. J.K. Dobbins is an elusive running back he's dual threat, and to back up Mark Ingram, maybe take his spot. I don't know, depending on what they look at. But Gus Edwards, Mark Ingram, and J.K. Dobbins, that is going to be a force to be reckoned with soon to come. They picked more defense with Justin Matabuki and Malik Harrison later in the 3rd round. And these are 2 very good picks, again, to help their already stacked defense. But their offense is, of course, what really is amazing. But they're only helping their defense with a Malik Harrison who has very good talent and who will do very good. Now we are going to look at our honorable mentions. We got the Buffalo Bills. They had an amazing draft. Obviously, they're honorable mentions. They just couldn't be on here. Joe Burrow and the Bengals, amazing. Also, they got T. Higgins. I mean, to help out Joe Burrow, because AJ Green's getting old. And then, of course, the Minnesota Vikings, who took Justin Jefferson, one of the best, probably the fourth best wide receiver, maybe third best wide receiver in the NFL draft. Some say one, I do not. And then number one, the Dallas Cowboys. Their first round pick, of course, was CeeDee Lamb. And before coming into this, they were thinking about taking Trayvon Diggs with that 17th pick. But they didn't think they would get him. They thought they would just get CeeDee Lamb. So they got CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver out of Oklahoma. And then in round two, they ended up getting Trayvon Diggs, cornerback out of Alabama. And then round three, they got Neville Gallimore, defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. And back to they need a wide receiver. It's really going to help them. All it can do is help them. Trayvon Diggs, cornerback, they need a lot of defensive help. You can tell by how they were drafting, and they drafted amazingly with helping their defense. Mike McCarthy is doing a great job. Their GM is doing a great job. Jerry Jones is doing a great job. Neville Gallimore will only help their defense, and Reggie Robinson II and Trayvon Diggs are stars. Definitely Trayvon Diggs is a stud. Bradley Anae, defensive end out of Utah, he is amazing. I mean, it's nice that they took a quarterback out of the 7th round, out of James Madison, Ben DiNucci. He looks like a very promising young talent, and I am glad to see this. Thank you so much for watching this video. See you next time.